What I mean to say is 9/11 didn't happen and all of a sudden people are like, oh, we don't like Muslims. Okay, let's go into our 1985 DeLorean. Anyone? Back to the Future reference? Omid? 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Let's go into our DeLorean time machine, travel back in time, 1,000 years. Real quick, to talk about the perception versus the reality and why there's such a big gap. 1095, what happened in 1095? Huge event. Anyone? Crusade. Pope Urban II gave the edict to launch the Crusades, what many people call the quote-unquote Holy War, right? To reclaim the quote-unquote Holy Lands from the infidels. The infidels, of course, at that time were Muslims. It was the use of religious language for the sake of political ambition, right? Not the first time that's what happened. The use of propaganda to justify and inspire the engines of war. Nothing new. In the 11th century, around this time, there was a poem that was written called the Song of Roland. Anyone heard of it? You guys can't cheat, you're professors. Just stick with me for a second. Song of Roland was an 11th century poem rendering in verse an 8th century battle, which is, by the way, a staple for most Western literature classes today. If you're taking Western Lit, you will probably encounter a Song of Roland to this day. It's a classic poem, taught and celebrated across universities. It is called a masterpiece of epic drama. So, what is it about? Song of Roland depicts how Muslims slaughtered 20,000 soldiers in Charlemagne's army in medieval Spain. Even Roland, the emperor's nephew, was slain. That's terrible. Except that it didn't really happen. What happened was the real battle was in 778, and the killers weren't Muslim. They were Christian Basques, okay, who were furious at Charlemagne for pillaging the city of Pamplona. So again, the reality versus the perception. So we have this epic poem that is taught to this day that coincided with the Crusades in the 11th century that depicts a slaughtering Muslim horde of innocent Christians, which in fact didn't happen. Because the reality at that time was that Muslims actually had pretty good relations with Charlemagne. But that poem is still taught to this day. I'm just talking about using art as propaganda. Let's fast forward. Let's go to the 14th century. Anyone heard of Divine Comedy? All right, Divine Comedy. Some hands are raised. An epic masterwork. The preeminent poem and greatest work of Italian literature from 14th century, written by Dante. Okay. Dante takes us on a journey from hell to purgatory to paradise. Dante writes about the Prophet Muhammad. Here we go. Canto 28. How mutilated, see, is Muhammad. In front of me doth Ali weeping go, cleft in the face from forelock unto chin. He takes a time to talk about how Prophet Muhammad is in hell, being tortured. Okay, so this is now 14th century. This anti-Muslim imagery is still present. So much so that it's present in the masterwork of Italian literature. Let's fast forward to 18th century. Voltaire. I hope you guys know Voltaire, right? If not, then education system, it's over. So I'm just going to weep. Voltaire, brilliant as he was, in 1736 wrote a 5-act play entitled Fanaticism of Muhammad the Prophet. Very subtle. In 1920s, we had movies. Awesome. Rudolph Valentino's The Sheikh. Anyone? Silent movie. It is a silent movie. Rudolph Valentino was a superstar of the silent era. But the problem was that the movie The Sheikh, which had him as a very handsome Lothario, if you will, who was able to beg beautiful women, every single depiction of the Muslims and Arabs around him was that of savage hordes who used to auction off women. Okay. Let's fast forward to the 1970s. Anyone alive in the 1970s? To brave soul that raises her hand. Awesome. You had the caricatures of Arabs, okay, in the cartoons, as obese, with big hook noses, scheming beady eyes, wearing the thobe, right, greedy, plotting. What was happening at that time? It coincided with politics. We had OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, which then, was like a consolidation of Middle Eastern countries that realized, oh wait, oil, yes, that is a resource that we should use for our profit. Rising gas prices, and a lot of animosity towards the Middle East, right? What was interesting was that this depiction of Arabs in the 70s that coincided with this political skirmish, if you will, was very reminiscent of the depiction of Jews in America in the first half of the 20th century. How are Jews portrayed? Just go back and check out these cartoons. Obese, corpulent, beady eyes, big noses, scheming, always plotting. It's almost the same exact depiction. You just have to change the headdress. Really. 1979. What happened in 1979, guys? Throw it out there. Iran. What happened in Iran?
Hostage crisis.
Hostage crisis. There was this guy, big guy, the boogeyman. Go ahead. Ayatollah Khomeini, the Islamic Republic, right? The Iranian Revolution, which led to the U.S. hostage crisis. What else happened in 1979? Afghanistan, Soviet invaded Afghanistan, right? No, it's okay. It's okay. For those of you who want to know how the story ended, you just have to watch Rambo 3. Sylvester Stallone single-handedly destroyed the Russian army and took them out, and Afghanistan was saved. But I digress. In 79, you had the Iranian Revolution and the emergence of a great boogeyman, Ayatollah Khomeini, the Islamic Republic. In the 80s, you had the Iran-Iraq War. You had the Palestinian conflict. You had Desert Storm, right, the first time we had a war with Iraq. You had Libya, Gaddafi with his white glove and interesting speeches, which led to a spate of amazing Hollywood movies that I grew up with, which you guys didn't. Your generation doesn't know, but my generation does. And I'm sure Omid and Abdullah here know. You saw Chuck Norris in these amazing movies like Delta Force killing swaths of brown people in the Middle East, right? And when you're watching these movies, you're like, yeah, Chuck Norris, yeah, get him. And later when you watch the movies, you're like, oh, wow, this is kind of racist. You had movies like Iron Eagle, which I loved as a kid, but the same thing. This amorphous other, this Middle Eastern, brown, irrational, violent horde of people that they're bombing, right? You had a comedy movie, Down and Out in Beverly Hills, which is actually a funny movie starring Richard Dreyfuss and Nick Nolte, which is a satire. And you're watching this funny movie, and randomly when you're watching this funny movie, you notice that their neighbors are these Muslim folk who, again, traditional Arab stereotypical headdress, and all of a sudden he has like a train of 8 wives, all wearing black burqa, not saying a word. And you watch this movie now and you're like, what the heck is this doing in this movie? It's so random. Fast forward 10 years, Father of the Bride 2, anyone see it? 1995, was anyone born then? 2 people, one person like, maybe. Funny movie, harmless movie, right? Starring Steve Martin, comedy movie. And again, one of the interested buyers in the house is this stereotypical depiction of Muslim, Middle Eastern, Iranian, whatnot, who again has all these wives, all wearing black burqas, who have no voice. Fast forward 13 years, 14 years, and we saw this great movie called Sex and the City 2. Yes? Anyone? Okay, anyone see it? Yeah. And again, one person admits to seeing it. Well, things got a little bit better because the depiction of Abu Dhabi is an Abu Dhabi I have never seen in my life, right?
Right.
Again, all the Muslim women they depict are wearing black burqas who have no voices, and then all the men are corpulent. I don't even want to get into it. That's another topic. But what was interesting was that all these Orientalist depictions were regurgitated in this movie that came out only 2 years ago. But things have changed a bit because internationally and nationally that movie was ridiculed. Those caricatures and those stereotypes were like, this is laughable and disgusting. But just goes to show you, they're still there. True Lies, anyone? See, I remember Schwarzenegger as a beefed up actor. You guys remember him as a governor. True Lies in 1994, again, had Arnold Schwarzenegger taking on a swath of irrational, angry Arab/Muslim terrorists who fired their gun in the air and are angry at America, right? Interesting. And even Back to the Future, I mentioned the DeLorean, my cultural reference. It's a great movie. You should watch it. If you watch the first movie, randomly in the movie, you see Doc Brown, being chased by Libyan terrorists because he got money for them. He got money from them he basically used them to get the nuclear fission that he needed for his time travel machine that he created out of his 1985 DeLorean. And the Libyan terrorists are angry at him and they kill him in front of Nordstrom in a shopping mall, right? Parking lot. That's what happened in the movie. And you're watching this movie and you're like, that's really random. I wonder what this has to do with anything. But again, the depiction of Muslims and the Middle Easterners is angry, anti-American, violent. The reason why I'm mentioning this is this image, this perception of the Middle East, of Iran, of Libya, of Afghanistan, of Iraq, of Palestine, of Muslim, was all lumped together in the 70s and 80s and even the 90s as what I call the brown threat, right? It wasn't necessarily Muslim. It was just that Middle Eastern Arab threat. And it was seeped in our collective consciousness. It was already there. In fact, it goes back already to 1,000 years. Song of Roland. Okay, perception. Perceptions are important.